Hello, my name is Andrew Keane. Welcome to Keane on America, the daily interview show about the United States. Hello, everybody. My guest today, Thomas S. Mullaney, is a distinguished historian at Stanford University. He's an expert on Asian, Chinese history, Chinese technology. Many of you will be familiar with his work on a hunt for the rarest of Chinese typewriters. It was a book called The Chinese Typewriter, A History, which won all sorts of awards. But he has a new book out this week, which in some people's minds might actually be blowing up his own discipline of history. The book is called How We Disappear, A Personal History of Information. And Tom is joining us from Palo Alto, where he lives. So, Tom, is this a subversive book against your own discipline of history? Are you suggesting that we disappear? The subtitle of the book is A Personal History of Information, suggests that we're all sand falling through our fingers and nothing can really be remembered?
Well, it's either the most subversive thing that I could write as an historian or the most vocal defense of what it is that we do. I don't think there's any historian, certainly that I have ever met in my profession, who doesn't already know that what we claim to do as historians is in some sense an ideal that can never be reached, the reconstruction of human experience, however you want to frame it. And then naturally that raises the question, well, kind of why do it? And it's a similar question for life. You know, if death awaits us all, what is the point of in the living? And so this book is my attempt to try to explain to myself and then to readers what is it and why is it valuable, what we do as historians, but also why is life worth living if and it's not a claim. We know the universe dies. The second law of thermodynamics is not to be negotiated with, and so what is the point of it all? So in some sense, it's a defense, a vocal defense, as much as it is potentially a bit subversive.
Although you're talking to me, you don't need me to tell you this, from Palo Alto, where there are some people, some very rich people, I think, who believe they can elude that second law of dynamics, thermodynamics.
Yes, I think there are some at least who claim this publicly. I've never met any of them in person, so I don't know their innermost
they're
thoughts.
The people who, Kara Swisher has a new series out on CNN. She's a critic of these people about wanting to live forever. But so I guess in a way, this is a book written against those tech utopians.
It is. I hope they'll read it and maybe arrive at the conclusion that well, face the facts, I guess, is come to terms with it, but then realize that whatever the urgency or ambition that led them to wanting to live forever, that there is an alternative, which is kind of rejoining the reality, the physical reality, but still finding very, very deep meaning in that. We don't need to last forever to have meant something.
Yeah, and I'm somehow skeptical that guys like Ray Kurzweil will read this kind of book, but that's another story.
I'm skeptical that anyone will read this book. So
you're getting a lot of coverage. I think a lot of people will read it. It's a very interesting book. So it's a book triggered by very personal loss, the loss of your father and then of your mother. Tell me a little bit about how the loss of your parents inspired, if that's the right word, this book, How We Disappear.
Well, it didn't inspire it. It in the aftermath of especially my father's death, and then into my mother's death. It kind of crystallized it or put it into frame. So this book is about 25 years in the making. My father died in 2017, so obviously the timelines are different. But there is something that started in me for whatever reason a very long time ago, where I began to take notice of, repeatedly take notice of, and then you could say obsess with, the way I call it in the book is intransitive disappearance, forms of disappearance that are not spectacular, like libraries going up in flames, or of book burnings or genocide, or these cataclysmic singular acts of destruction, but the more drifty, sort of loose and everyday and uneventful ways that things disintegrate, fall apart, senesce, obsolescence, and so forth. And I became sort of a pack rat of everything I could get my hands on from every discipline I could think of, every walk of life. Um, and so what that meant by definition is that this book was never going to happen, and was impossible. It was going in too many directions. So I have my career. I wrote, I guess, 3 monographs in that time, a number of other volumes, and it was. But the sudden impact of my father's death, which we were not expecting as a family. My mother had always been the one that confronted cancer, defeated cancer, was reconfronted it. So it was something kind of out of left field, and that's the moment when all of my training as an historian kind of came crashing through the bedroom windows and the walls and the roof, into my own life, sitting in his room, in his office, his home office. My parents were estranged. I call them sort of not divorced by that point. So this was his everything. Everything was in there. And it wasn't immediate. I mean, the immediacy of death was just sadness and confusion and sleeplessness and kind of the paperwork of death. There's a lot of paperwork that accompanies the death of a loved one. But it was somewhere in the wake of all of that I think something switched, and I decided that maybe I would try both to understand my family, which I have never understood, and take one last shot at understanding disappearance. And that was the more proximate birth of the book.
But of course, it's always more complicated than that. The idea of losing a parent is also one, I guess, in a way for you, that in a way you found your parents when they died.
I found a good deal about them, and I also found effectively things that made me aware of everything that I've lost. So there's an episode in the book where I describe finding a court transcript. My father, as a 19-year-old, was wanted for arrest and went and sort of turned himself in. It was a case of mistaken identity. Apparently, there was another Thomas Mullaney that had assaulted someone, and he was just there to clear his name. But I have this 2-page transcript of my father as a 19-year-old, and I can kind of hear his voice. And so in one sense, I have him, he's there. But then the question becomes, where is his voice the day before, the day after? Where is my 13-year-old father, my 22-year-old father? So there is this, every act of finding in the book is also, and primarily, something that reveals just how much I don't know and may never know. With my mother, there's a secret to her life and her identity I describe in the book. I do find in the course, right before she died, kind of the facts of the matter of those secrets, but the real secret she succeeded in taking to the grave and will never be known. And that was the secret of why she felt the need to keep a secret in the first place. And that'll make more sense if anyone reads the book. It's not self-evident why she carried this big backpack of rocks around her whole life. And she succeeded in taking that one to absentia, or wherever we want to say the afterlife for some listeners, perhaps. But so it was interesting as an historian to turn the things that I have honed, always studying people out there and other than me and other times and places, but this was about bringing that to this most intimate of relationships, the father, the mother.
Tom, why, and I've got members in my own family rather like this, why do we obsess over collecting materials in our life and not be willing to give them up? Is it the fear of death, the excitement about death, a kind of narcissism? What is it about life that encourages some of us, at least, to aggregate and maybe obsess over data, things associated with our life and the lives of others?
I think let's make a distinction between the stuff that belonged to somebody else that you can't part with versus, your own stuff. I think the stuff that belonged to maybe one's own parents or one's grandparents, and I think something that drives that is very similar to why historians archive, which is historians archive far more than, and librarians archive far more than we will ever consult. So what we're saving is not some knowledge that we know is there. We haven't read every page in the National Archives. No one has. It's saving the possibility of interpretation at some future point by some future researcher who we may never meet. We're trying to, and I think that even individuals in their own lives do that as well. And if anyone has ever, any listener, has gone through the stuff of a departed loved one, there is that feeling, I don't know what this is, and it may have been meaningful. If I decide to get rid of it, that's the end of the story. The possibility of its meaning will never reveal itself. But if I just hold on to it, I don't know, that I'm keeping the ball in play of meaning. I think there is some aspect of that for individuals. It's all tied up in all sorts of different things. I mean, one is just the suburban American basement, and the attic and so forth. Just, there is no cost to purging. There is a perceived cost of getting rid of something. Maybe I'll need that later. And in some sort of, suburban American, house somewhere, there's so many spaces that can take up the place of like the equivalent of a kitchen junk drawer. And so why make the decision ever? And maybe I will need it at some point. So there's, again, a similar idea. We're playing this game of probabilities. Right now, I don't need this thing, but who knows? Maybe there'll be another pandemic in which I'll need those XYZs I collected over the last 10, since the first pandemic that I lived through, and et cetera. And then what ends up happening is the human being's habits, hangups, game of probability becomes the job of the next of kin when we die. And suddenly, they're inheriting just stuff, and no one really knows what to do with the stuff of a deceased loved one. It's just it's so full of unknowns, and that's why it's so painful to make the decision to throw things out, because you're throwing away the possibility that was something. You're throwing away what's the Citizen Kane. You're throwing away Rosebud. You might be throwing away Rosebud and not know it.
Although Rosebud in the movie at least didn't tell us anything. That's the whole point of Rosebud.
Yeah. But
so in a way, Tom, perhaps for the benefit of future generations, we shouldn't be collecting things, because it's a kind of punishment to children to inherit all this stuff that's either overabundant or meaningless.
I do think that I think there's truth in what you've just said, and in the sense that I've come to talk about this more, but there is, in some recent span of time, at least in the United States, where I think we're sort of behind the curve on this in terms of, if we think globally, but the idea of discussing end of life, that now it is more common than not. My mom My mom never believed in sharing, as anyone who reads the book will find out, never believed in sharing anything about her interiority really with those around her, and withheld and concealed and did many things in her life for whatever reason. And I give her the benefit of the doubt as to why, but she did want to talk about what I want when I die. Do I want to be resuscitated in this event? Where do I want to pass, under what circumstances? I think this is an enormously positive thing that people have started to do. It's an awful conversation. It's a strange conversation. So I know people that have had the conversation. They don't have any. There are no ailments to speak of, or they're very early in a process. What we have yet to begin is the same kind of conversation about disappearance, and that has to do with our stuff, not our bodies. That has to do with having the conversation that would be the parallel. Here is a conversation about what I consider to be a dignified death. And then there could be a conversation. This is what I would consider to be a dignified disappearance, a disappearance that accords with my values as a human being. And if we did that, then it would make sense. There would be a reason to decide in our lives about getting rid of some things, or because you're right, as it is, we are so afraid of disappearance. I would argue that we're more afraid of disappearance than death in many cases, that we don't want to deal with that at all. And then you're right, that becomes just a punishment to you deal with it. So it's just kicking the can down the road to another generation of, you figure out what all of this was and meant and adds up to. I don't want to, or I think there's truth to what you just said.
Yeah, and it fits in some ways to a broader cultural conversation we're having about disappearance. A historian on the East Coast has just written a book about American gerontocracy. I'm sure you've seen the book. And his argument is that old people in America, sort of literally and symbolically, from Biden and Pelosi onwards, don't know how to leave the stage. So you're talking about the same thing in a broader sense about leaving the stage, are you? In this book, How We Disappear.
I don't know, I've forgotten now. I've been writing this book for so long that I forget what I've written, but even if not, it'll be a useful.
And by the way, sorry, just to interrupt.
Yeah.
It's Samuel Moyn. I'm sure you know his work. He teaches law at Yale,
right?
But he's a historian.
No, it is. So there's a song that maybe some of your listeners enjoy or on their playlist, "Lust for Life," right? Iggy Pop, "Lust for Life." So this, like so many other songs of his, is in some way informed by a reflection on drug addiction and darkness and sadness and giddiness. Think of Velvet Underground and these sorts of, or certain Eric Clapton songs. Okay, well, if anyone here remembers, there was what was it? I forget which cruise line got licensed the rights of using "Lust for Life," and you can turn on your TV and see, people in bikinis with beach balls and margaritas, and in the background is "Lust for Life." Or the Beatles song, "You Have to Admit It's Getting Better," and that, I think, is LG. The electronics and television company. "You got to admit it's getting better." Okay, the verse of that song is, "I used to," what is it? "I used to beat my woman and keep her from the ones she loved." And then the chorus is this very dark, melodic, "You have to admit it's getting better," and so forth. So I'm bringing this up because songs have a particular set of degradation pathways of disappearance, which is, songs are eminently sampleable and end up getting cut up and reframed. So reframed in some cases that you can take a song about drug addiction and turn it into something about kind of hedonistic pleasure cruises with no consequences, or you can take a song about misogyny and the darkness of relationships and turn it into something to sell flat screen TVs. That is a form of disappearance. That is a form of disappearance that many people actually undertake. They are sort of sampled and reordered and cut up into pieces and made to mean things that they never meant in their life. Now, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? That depends. In that case, it's really in the eye of the beholder, of the person. There are some people who would say, I have no problem disappearing the way a song disappears. I'm as long as someone is singing my melody in some capacity, sure, put me in a cruise commercial, repurpose me, resample me in this way. I'm not precious. I'm not, that doesn't matter to me. And for another person, they might say, that's a fate worse than death to me, to be resampled to mean things I never meant and so forth. And so right there, I'm just using that as an example. Right there, that's a conversation about one's values, about how they live one's life, what's important to them. And that can guide the decision of what to keep and what to throw, or how to explain or how not to explain. There are writers who very famously want all of their unpublished manuscripts burned. They want to canonically live the way they understood their finished works to be. They want their finished works to be them in posterity. And some people might say, that kind of sounds like me. If I were I would want the same thing. Speaking for myself, that to me is a fate worse than death. The idea of just being this simplistically sum total in to the extent that anyone thinks about me after my death, I want them to be as confused about me as I am about myself in my life, because I am very confused most of the time with regard to myself. So it'd be a weird thing to imagine that, this is a person who is sum total explainable through, I don't know, the 4 books they published in their life, when I know that every book that I've ever published in my life was just this gasping attempt to get over a finish line. And that most of the time, the rest, the 99% of my life is just kind of cacophonous, loose ends. And so that's something that I think there is an opportunity to think through, is dignified disappearance.
Which is, I think, Sam Moyne's point in his book on gerontocracy. You're in Palo Alto, the center of our technological revolution. The subtitle of your book is A Personal History of Information. You've written on the history of technology elsewhere in China. I wonder, Tom, whether you agree with this and whether it's ironic that the more technology we seem to have, the more we want to record ourselves, the more we disappear. So the ubiquity now of photography online, on Instagram, for example, is more about disappearance than appearance. What's the connection between technology then and memory, or technology and the absence of memory? It seems as if the more technology we have, the less we remember.
Yeah, it's like the classic fear of the written word. So the way the central argument of the book ties to this, and it is entropy comes first, information comes second. Like disorder is the rule, tending towards disorder is the rule, and any form of order, putting things in formation, is something that happens, to that pre-existing tendency. And what that means is, we have to do an immense amount of work at the cognitive level, at the social level, but also at the atomic and the molecular level, the cellular level, to keep our lives in formation. It's constant, unceasing effort and upkeep. And on a day-to-day life, there are 2 things that a human being has to achieve if they're going to get through the day. The first thing that we have to achieve is coherence. I need to form some sort of avatar that is Gesundheit, that is Thomas Sean Mullaney. And I've got to form it out of just this unbelievable cacophony of stimuli that are constantly bombarding me all the time. Atmospheric pressure, the feeling of the fabric of my shirt on my skin, just like gamma rays, like the amount of stuff that we are ruling out, that we are filtering out in order to kind of put together this this sense of order is immense. It's staggering. And the other thing that we've got to be able to do is continuity. Continuity is not a given. The fact that I'm sitting here and in 1 minute, I'm Thomas Sean Mullaney. I live in Palo Alto. I'm a professor of Chinese history. The fact that in 1 minute I will continue to be Thomas Sean Mullaney, a professor of history in Palo Alto, is actually not something that is absolutely taken for granted. That is also something that requires immense upkeep. The fact that you and I are speaking this language called English, which is a bunch of bleeps and bloops, that every generation we have to re-up and resubscribe to and pass on to the next generation, just speaks to the enormity of the effort that goes into keeping everyday life in formation. So you can think of that as sort of subsistence level agriculture of life. We need a subsistence level information just to be you, just to be me. But as you're pointing, there's surplus information. There are smartphones. There are things that we build with, there's poetry. There's GPS. There's all of these additional things, and there's some bandwidth. That's a gradient, I would say. In some levels, unquestionably, the human ingenuity of putting more stuff into formation to make even more meaning and to do different things with our lives, I think unquestionably has this positive valence. It cycles back. But then there's this bandwidth, and I don't know where exactly to draw the line, but I know it when I see it, of just, we're just trying to find games to play with this thing we have made, and we're trying to find a place in life for this, to the point now where at its extremes, it's killing us. Whether we talk about AI data centers and water and things of this nature, we have pushed the information of life way beyond anything like what is let's say necessary and even meaningful into some other range of it. And I don't know how that story plays out, but certainly, so you come back to your earlier point of individuals who think that they can record every last part of their life, that they can live forever, that they can capture it all. It's starting to seep into our imaginations, where that is simply a falsehood. It simply will never be. The story will not turn out like those individuals are imagining it. And I don't know if you can jostle someone from that kind of fantasy at that stage of the game. I don't know if it's possible to come back to first principles when you've gone that far. But at the baseline, I think human beings are human beings precisely because of this ability to put things in formation. And that's what especially when I teach my classes on the history of information from Stanford, I say, listen, we're not just going to talk about satellite dishes and Sputnik and, ComSat and the history of the book. We're also going to talk about things that classically do not get included in textbooks on the history of information.
Is there an element of insanity in all this? There's a wonderful short story, I don't know if you've read it, by Calvino, The Adventure of a Photographer, about a man who went around photographing everything and everyone obsessively. I mean, it was written in the pre-internet age, but it was perfectly suitable for our Instagrammable times. Is there an element of madness in the arguments you make in this book? It sounds like you, in the death of your parents or in wanting to hang on to them or understand them, went through, I wouldn't say insanity, but certainly it leads us in that direction, doesn't it?
Well, it leads in the direction. My insanity came earlier in my life. So by that point, it was, I was, I had done that hero's quest and come back from it, but so not in their death was that part of it, but rather it was, if we entertain the idea that history is that history is in some sense a reconstruction of dead experiences, dead past, dead individuals, those that are gone from us. If we follow that logic to its actual, unsparingly to its logical conclusion, there is an insanity in that. There is an impossibility and an insanity in that, because and you immediately start noticing it. You start saying, I make the remark in my book that I gave you, the reader, the basic biography of my father. I told you where he was born. I told you where he grew up. I told you that he was drafted into the military. I told you that he did this job. I didn't tell you how many hairs are on his head. I didn't tell you if all of his teeth were straight or crooked. I didn't tell you anything about the scent of his aftershave, or did he favor his left foot over his right foot when he walked. And someone might say, well, Tom, stop. Come on. Well, that's irrelevant. It's like, no. You don't get to pull that card out of the deck. If what we're talking about is the reconstruction, then it's all on the table. It's all on the table. And once we say it's all on the table, meaning that we can't just say, just the important stuff. Once we put that stuff all on the table, then we are on the hook to explain where all that stuff goes. Where does all that stuff go? And when I talk with my students, I always, there's this one classic in our field, and every field has its classic that makes this claim that it is reconstructing human experience. And the way I try to explain to my students, I said, if you ever read a book that actually reconstructs human experience, it'll be 1 trillion pages long, and it will make Naked Lunch look like a kindergarten book. It'll be insane, because experience, unfiltered experience, is not two guys talking on a podcast. It is not a difficult day. It is an n-dimensional vortex of stimuli and daydream. It's not domesticated. Anytime you read a work of history, it is experience that is then being kind of domesticated into a narrative with turning points and main characters and secondary characters and phases and thematic arguments and so forth. And that's the point, to come back to the idea, is this a subversive book? For every historian, every practicing historian, everyone knows that we're never actually writing experience, even if that's one of our stated objectives of trying to tap into it. But then that raises the question, then why are you doing it? Why do something under a certain flag if you know you can never uphold the ideal of that flag? And the answer to that is, we do that in our everyday life as well. If you right now were to tap into your so-called experience, you'd lose it immediately. Like, even your experience of you as just a person sitting in a chair talking with another person sitting on a couch, that's already well into post-production, to use a kind of music term. That is well post-produced. We are our books. We are the same thing to our own experience, what a history book is to historical experience. And I think generally, I don't think one human being would ask to another human being, hey, you're a human being, you're supposed to be experiencing things, but you're not really experiencing things. You're telling stories about things, and that's not the same thing. So why do you do that? Isn't that futile? Just the same way that someone might say to an historian, like, why bother if you can't uphold this? And the answer is, for the human being, well, if the story is living, that's not secondary. Human beings need to tell stories to live and get through our day and maintain continuity and maintain coherence. Historians just do that as like a profession, a job under certain rules and ordinances and protocols. We're the professional cadre, but what we do is remarkably the same, I would say, as what every human does every second of their existence. So that's where my defense of history, I guess, kicks in. My vocal defense of history is it's just the professional counterpart of this absolutely essential human need that every one of us does all the time.
Yeah, I mean, the more you talk, the more the work of somebody like Borges comes to mind, the idea of labyrinths and infinite libraries.
Mm. And maps that equal the terrain and all of these counter,
So I assume that you're influenced by that and that way of writing about the world, or maybe not writing about the world.
I don't know. I mean, I have a background in music, and all I ever know is, there's two ways to describe influence. There's how do you talk about it when you're in Fader magazine versus how do you actually talk about it. So a lot of times influence is what does a band sound like? And from a marketing standpoint, it's a good idea to say, we are the love child of insert band one, insert band two. But in fact, if you actually know the guys, it turns out that they grew up listening to Neil Young and Shostakovich, but they're a punk band, so there's influence and then there's influence.
So you're the love child of everyone.
Gosh,
or maybe nobody. So Tom, and I can imagine your skepticism here or dismissiveness. What would you say to all the people in Palo Alto, all the big tech companies now in the AI revolution, who are using, or some of them at least think that they can use their technology to make us live forever, so that we'll have maybe bots of your parents, your mother or your father, who will exist forever for your kids and for the kids of your kids?
Stop. I see no, there is something, once we start playing with that, and it's already started. I mean, I'm sure you have seen these variously algorithmically created so-called moving photographs of Gandhi, or a picture of Abraham Lincoln where he's sort of turning or something of this nature. It is it short circuits. We have to remember, and I talk about this in the book, human beings have been playing with our own limitations as an organism forever. So think about, I talk about, if you take a torch and you light up one end of it and then spin it in a circle really rapidly, we know we're not really seeing a circle of fire, but we are seeing a circle of fire. And the only reason we're seeing a circle of fire is that we have figured out that our visual system, our brain, can't take a picture fast enough in order for it, for the myth, for the trick of this magic trick to be revealed. That's cinema. That's moving pictures. It doesn't matter if you say to yourself, this is a bunch of static images in close sequence. It's I see what I see. It's moving. But there, at some level, and we can do it so far that we're horrified that we have bad dreams from seeing a movie, for years and years. Like we can produce these effects in ourselves. But now we're getting to this place where, well, we never know the limits of the human organism, I suppose, but there is reason to worry that we are so far exceeding that it's hard to understand what the value at that point is. We could reach a place where we simply don't have the critical facilities as just a human being, not smarter or less intelligent, more educated, less educated. Every human being everywhere just does not have the wetware to be able to critically look at a deep fake of their deceased mother. It just messes. It has the possibility of so messing with one, and so short-circuiting and bypassing just our limitations and our, as an organism, that I can't really think out of deep medical, closely monitored psychiatric treatments, some sort of very specific use case where this might have therapeutic value. The idea of unleashing that on ourselves, I cannot fathom an argument in which I'm convinced that that's a good idea. I just can't. And so if it's a bot of your mother and father, that's what it is. It is a bot of it, and that's all it ever can be. But our bodies are just not built to critically keep that distance, and you see that now with the stories, even in LLMs at their current. I know they're amazing, but even at their highly limited technical abilities right now, of people forging emotional connections with them, and children making major decisions based on chats and so forth. We are getting to a place where, to use another well-cited, like we might be amusing ourselves to death. And I think that but the pace of it is I don't know that there's I haven't observed much critical reflection on coming out of the neighborhoods where this stuff is made.
Well, there you have it. Amusing ourselves to death is something I think that Thomas Mullaney warns us about in How We Disappear, A Personal History of Information. He's noted that historians do the dirty work of necromancers. They're in the business of death. So it's nice to have an undertaker on the show, Tom.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Hi, this is Andrew again. Thank you so much for listening or watching the show. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. We're on Substack, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all the platforms. And I'd be very curious as to your comments as well on what you think of the show, how it can be improved, and the kinds of guests that you would enjoy hearing or listening to in future. Thank you again.